Okay, everybody, I can see that it's now 40 past 6, so I'll open and welcome. So welcome to everybody. My name is Sarah. I'm from Renovations. We're running a renovation webinar series, and this is the second in the series. So tonight's 30-minute webinar is on the topic of when your home no longer fits, renovation solutions for growing families. So throughout this webinar, we're going to be joined by two experts. We've got Sam and Ollie who are joining us today. And we're going to be covering a case study, and we're going to be looking at a couple called Natasha and Daniel. We're going to be following their journey. We're also going to be looking through the benefits of renovating versus moving. This is a very common question that people often have. Should I renovate or should I move? What's the best options there? We're also going to be covering some really smart renovation options of what you can do for your home to expand and to give you that extra space that you need. One of the guys will talk us through the 3 top tips that we're going to leave you with today. Hopefully they're going to be helpful to you. There will be some time for a Q&A at the end, so feel free to pop some questions in the chat as we go. I will be also putting some questions and trying to get some feedback as we go through, but please pop your questions in the chat and there'll be time for Q&A at the end. And then obviously we'll just leave you with our details at the end. So I'm just going to hand over to Ollie now. I think, Ollie, you're going to start us off. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for joining. So I'm Ollie. I'm one of the renovation consultants based in London at Refresh. So a common theme in our webinar series is that we like to run through a case study of a project that we've previously completed, since this really helps to discuss and help you understand what the process looks like from start to finish. And I'm sure many of the challenges faced by this particular client will resonate with you all as well. So when it comes to creating more livable space, there's many different approaches that can be taken, and it's all going to depend on your goals as the homeowner, the intricacies of your specific property. So the most obvious ways to create more space is going to be via an extension, whether that's just a ground floor extension or a loft conversion project, all pretty standard. But for the project we're going to be discussing today, Natasha and Daniel's project, this option was actually out of scope because they lived in a flat, so there was no scope for any kind of extension or extending into the loft space. So we had to get a little bit creative on this one to create better living space for them. So it's all about Natasha and Daniel today. So this was a project we completed in Westminster towards the end of last year. So to provide a bit of background, Natasha and Daniel, they had a lovely, at the time, 1-bed flat in Westminster. They absolutely loved the flat. They lived there for over 10 years, so they were very, very attached to it. They loved the area, loads of great schools and everything nearby as well. So they really did not want to part ways with the flat that they lived in for so long. But the problem they had is that their 1-bed flat was no longer suitable, no longer fit for their living situation, since their young child had since grown up into a toddler. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll see that Natasha and Daniel, they were experiencing all of the key challenges that people generally encounter when they've outgrown their home. So everybody was kind of cramped into 1 bedroom space where they had a double bed, a crib for their young child, toys all over the flat really. So in the 1 bedroom that they had, throughout the living room, just anywhere they could, because there was a lack of storage space. There was no separation between living space, workspace, and again just a lack of storage space, and generally the layout again just wasn't fit for purpose. So we'll see here a couple of images to show the pre-existing state. So there's nothing really wrong with the flat. It was already a lovely flat, to be honest. Perhaps a little bit tired and worn down, and you know they thought that it needed modernising in general as well. But they had a nice big open plan kitchen and living space. So again, nothing particularly wrong with it. But you'll see, in the top right corner, they've got a sort of makeshift office set up there for work. You'll see kids' toys scattered around, which was a bit of a common theme throughout the property. And then the image on the right just shows the existing bathroom. So again, reasonably nice bathroom already, but hadn't been touched in 10, maybe 20 years actually. So moving on to the next slide, the first big decision that Natasha and Daniel had to make was, do we renovate our existing space or should we move house? So this is always a big decision. It's always a very personal decision as well. Natasha and Daniel, they really didn't want to move. They didn't want to part ways with their existing flat. They were very, very attached to it. And of course, the other thing that's going to be influencing this type of decision is going to be costs. So in many cases, it's going to be a lot more economical to renovate an existing space than it's going to be to move house. I'm sure you're aware that's going to attract things like stamp duty first and foremost, but then there's all the other fees, the legal fees, the surveying fees, the removals fees, and just the time that it takes as well. So for Natasha and Daniel, primarily, what was driving their decision is that they really loved the flat and they did not want to part ways with it. They were really, really attached to it. They wanted to stay exactly where they were. But then secondly, in the background, and sometimes this is the primary reason for a lot of people, is the costs of moving. And then finally, of course, when you renovate, that gives you the opportunity to completely tailor the design and finish around your specific living requirements. So if you move house, often due to how expensive that process is, there's not much money left over to renovate the new house that you buy for a good few years, which means unless in the unlikely event you find a property that exactly matches your requirements, it's just not going to be tailored to you in the same way that that renovating is going to be. So for Natasha and Daniel, they really wanted to know and understand straight away, was their plan feasible? Did they have enough space? Was there enough space in the pre-existing flat to create an extra bedroom? Was it feasible economically? And so yeah, those are two of the key questions. And then other key questions they were asking were, does a project like this require an architect or a structural engineer? How long is it going to take? And are we going to need to move out, or can we live in the property while the works are underway? So there's a lot of questions to answer and no one size fits all approach here. So it's always critical to ensure that we get the right professionals involved throughout the project, but especially early on. The sooner you get the right professionals involved, the better, because this just avoids wasting time and money pursuing options that simply aren't going to be feasible. So the very first thing we did for Natasha and Daniel, and what we do for any sizable project, is conduct a feasibility study. So this involves appointing both a designer and a project manager who will consult with the client, understand their goals and objectives, understand the space that they're working with, and figure out whether or not their ideas are going to be feasible from a practical design and of course cost perspective. So while going through this process with Natasha and Daniel, we discovered a few key things. So first and foremost, the designer reviewed the space available in order to make a judgment call on whether or not they actually have the space to create a second bedroom within the flat. So that's not always as simple as just drawing a line and building a wall. In this particular flat, we needed to factor in fire safety when it came to separating the kitchen, the hallways, and other areas of the property. So that's number one. Number two as well, if you're going to spend all this money to create an extra bedroom, you need to be able to actually market the property with that second bedroom. So there's minimum space requirements. It's usually 6.5 meters squared if you're going to be able to legally list that property and sell that property as a 2-bedroom flat. So yeah, there were a lot of key decisions to make early on, but thankfully for them, they had a good enough space available within the property to create that second bedroom. Very high ceilings as well, which enabled us to come up with some very clever storage solutions to help as well. So that was the first thing. The second thing which came up after conducting some research, the lead designer on the project discovered that this was actually within a listed building. So normally for this type of project, strictly speaking, you don't need an architect, or at least you don't need to go through a full architectural service and get permissions from local councils, because it's just internal works, reconfiguring the internal floor space. Obviously, for an extension or a loft, then yes, you always going to need an architect, even if it's a permitted development. But for this particular project, perhaps not, although it would be best practice to adequately design the space. So we discovered it was a listed building, which meant we needed to obtain special permission from the local council, listed building consent. So that was quite a curveball. We needed to appoint a specialist architect who had experience with grade 2 listed buildings, and we also needed to make sure that the contractors that we ended up assigning to the project had experience with listed buildings, because there's a lot that can go wrong in these listed buildings. If you touch skirting or any structure or the ceiling coving, all things like that, if that gets removed and then in the future you try to sell the property, if it's grade 2 listed and the surveyor discovers that something's been removed that shouldn't have, then it's very likely that you're going to be ordered to reinstate that, which of course can become very costly. So that was the first and only curveball really on this project, but so it requires careful design considerations, and then once we had the concept designs and the draft scope of work, we then submitted that to a quantity surveyor who produced an estimate for the total cost. So essentially we've provided Natasha and Daniel with a general layout plan, which enabled them to assess whether or not they liked the new plan, if there was going to be enough space for them moving forwards, and also they had a very good and accurate idea of what the costs were going to look like, and this enabled them to make an informed decision as to whether this project was going to make practical and economic sense for them. So then the next stage is essentially fleshing it all out. So producing, back to the previous slide again, please, sorry. So producing, adding a lot more detail and annotations to the designs, refining the scope of work, making sure that as many decisions with regards to the design, the selections on the products, the flooring selections, paint colors, everything like that is fully decided up front, and then figuring out what the final cost of the build is going to look like. And then after that, we progress to the build stage. So on the next slides, this will give you an idea of what the overall project scope looks like. So I won't go into too much detail here because there's a lot going on in a small space, but this is an excerpt from the final drawings that were submitted to the client for their approval. So in the top, that shows the pre-existing layout. So you can see top right, really big open plan living and kitchen space. And there were various ideas we discussed with the client, but the idea that we decided upon was the kitchen area on the left was to cordon that off and create a bedroom in that space. And since the living room was already still very, very large, even by adding a kitchen, we were able to move the kitchen from one side to the other, cordon off the existing kitchen space. You'll see there's a lobby area created in there, which was there to create separation between the spaces, create an adequate hallway, ensure that all fire safety stipulations were adhered to. So that was the overall, this was the final design which was approved, and then progressing on to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the final outcome, so a few images here, these are after images. So the project was a great success. So we were able to successfully obtain the listed building consent that that was required to do the internal reconfigurations, and then we were able to move the kitchen successfully into the living space while maintaining adequate space for both kitchen and living. We created the second bedroom, and the key thing here, which I'm sure will attract everybody's attention, is that against an £80,000 investment roughly, they were able to add around 150,000 in value to their property, which is significant, almost double return on investment there. primarily because of the extra space that was created, and are now able to market the property as a 2-bed flat as opposed to a 1-bed flat, but also, of course, because they fully modernised it as well. So we move on just a few more before and after images to give you a general idea of what was accomplished here. So the 2 images at the top, so top left is before, so you can see again the open plan living and kitchen area. The kitchen's through the archway, and then to the right of that, this is the new kitchen and living area. So you can see the archway, we were able to cordon that off to create the bedroom space. The kitchen's on the right hand side, and then at the bottom we can see the pre-existing kitchen, and then the new space, which is a bedroom, which then flows nicely through the lobby area and the hallway into the kitchen. And then less relevant to the topic of the webinar, but worth pointing out, it was a great opportunity for them to upgrade other areas of the property throughout this project, of all the works that they were doing. And that's always a great idea if you have the financial means to do so, because it means you spread the preliminaries of what's essentially 2 or more projects against 1 project. So overall, it works out a lot more economical. And yeah, we were really happy with the result of the bathroom. We were able to get rid of the step that you see in the before image, and declutter it significantly. There's a bit too much going on with the previous bathroom, with bath and shower on one side and then sink on the other side. So we were able to successfully move everything from one side to the other, which just created a much more open feel, and yeah, really modernised the space as well. And finally, just a collection of the after images, which shows the kitchen and living space in its entirety, the new bedroom that was created, and then the partition wall, which had a sliding fire rated door, glazing at the top to keep light flow going through both sides of the property, and a slightly better image of the bathroom design as well in the bottom right hand corner.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you for running us through this inspiring case study. I personally find it inspiring because I usually get the impression from the people I go out to meet as a renovation consultant that you must only like big projects such as, extensions, loft conversions, or all-out space maximization. But this one here, because you have, I think, a lot of caveats and limitations, including it being a grade 2 listed building, given what's been achieved, I think there's a lot that's gone in there in terms of creativity and what's been proposed to the client and the value that they've extracted from it. So that goes as one of my favorites. So I'll follow on from where Ollie left off, and we're going to be looking at smart renovation options. Now, what do we mean when we talk about smart? What are the criteria? We saw in the case of Natasha and Daniel, they opted for kitchen and living configurations or reconfigurations because that is what their property would allow when fused with creative design. So the 3 criteria, or the 3 main criteria, are value-driven design, which allows you to invest in updates that enhance both the aesthetics and property value without unnecessary overspending. The second one would be maximizing functionality, and that allows to focus on layouts and upgrades that improve how the space is used in terms of storage, flow, multipurpose areas. And the third main criteria would be energy efficiency and sustainability. And it's something that Ollie also pointed out, and that is when it comes to choosing materials, lighting, appliances that reduce energy costs and environmental impact, amongst many others. So in terms of other effective and smart renovation options that would apply to the common housing stock in and across London, one of them could be a loft conversion, which could add a master suite or kids bedroom. A rear or side extension can open up the space for an open plan kitchen and living area, and even a small garage conversion can create a home office or teen hangout. Usually outbuildings and garden rooms in the back of the garden, in the common type of plot or property, can provide multi-purpose spaces such as a home gym, a workshop, games rooms, and sky is the limit in terms of what you can do with such spaces. A basement conversion can add valuable living space without extending the property's footprint. Now, before we move on to the next slide, if you may entertain me, please, if you were to make an educated or wild guess, what percentage of a renovation project's construction budget, on average, gets wasted? That's regardless of project type or size. If you can please just pop that in the chat box or say it verbally, we'll just allow 15 seconds for that and I'll continue. So 10% from Sarah, 20% from Rob. Any other takers? Going once, going twice? All right, we'll keep going. Oh, here's Salim with a 30. So some of you, as with a lot of other people, might be surprised to hear that on average, a project suffers a 30% loss of its entire project budget, and that's due to three main reasons. You don't have to take my word for it. This is a statistic that is derived from research into the home renovations market. These three main reasons are usually inadequate planning, poor communications between all parties involved, and a lack of active project management on site during the build. This generally results in an awful experience and a waste of money that could have been productively invested otherwise by the project owner. So what is it that we at Refresh Renovations do differently to counter these issues and avoid the pitfalls? We look at the three foundational pillars that support our proven process and that usually drives every project's success. The first would be planning and designing. When you have a project plan and the relevant designs and permissions or consents in place, that would be crucial to setting up any given renovation project for its success. Documentation is the second one. A comprehensive documentation supporting the project plan and the designs would always play into reaching the highest levels of transparency and accountability by setting clear expectations on the cost of the project and the quality of the work that you're going to attain. And the third one is the active project management during the build, which can make or break a project normally. And this is not to be conflated with a site manager. The role of a project manager is a different one. The presence of an effective project manager pulling all the moving parts together and coordinating the efforts ensures that all the levers are controlled for a smooth delivery in line with the approved documentations. So these three pillars enable us at every step of the way to provide an end-to-end design and build service as your single point of contact, combining our local expertise with transparent pricing and timelines across all London boroughs. And now going into the top three tips of this webinar. The first one, and this could remain our number one tip in perpetuity, and that's because it's never too early to start planning. Planning will give you the ability to think through plans and make sure that it really reflects what you seek to achieve. It gives you the relief from having to think and decide under pressure, especially of matters that are imposed by life circumstances and milestones. And finally, it helps you identify potential hidden costs and avoid costly changes during construction. So to give a very quick example on that one, some people say if things don't go the right way, if I don't need to have all the designs in place, I'll just deal with it during construction. But people who do things this way don't normally realize that when it comes to construction, they try to resolve these problems because of a lack of designs or planning. They end up paying a premium on redoing the work. And that proves to be counterproductive and results in a waste of money. Tip number two is understanding the project implications, especially when it comes to budget and timeline. This cannot be stressed enough on how important it is to have a proper understanding of the factors that have a significant bearing and heavily influence the project's budget and its timeline. That understanding will also allow you to align the scope with the budget, which ensures design ambitions match financial capacity to avoid compromises mid-project. And finally, it lays the groundwork for a stress-free journey during the build with a high level of control over the flow of scheduled works and any potential change order requests. And the third tip for today would be working with a single renovation partner. Now, what would that mean in comparison to going through the traditional routes where you start with an architect, they give you that the designs, and then you have to tender it with a QS, with a contractor, and so on and so forth. Working with a single renovation partner allows for seamless coordination. It provides you that one point of contact in communications and reduces mismanagement. The project would go from an idea into a brief, into the design stages, getting consents, and then moving on to costing, and then eventually getting to the build. That also allows for integrated planning that minimizes delays and unexpected expenses. And as we said, it highlights accountability and quality control. So having that single partner that oversees the entire process ensures the consistent standards from design to completion. We will be taking part in the Home Building and Renovating Show at Excel London, which will be happening from the 19th of September to the 21st. Our stand will be A149, so please do come and visit us. We'd love to have a chat with you to discuss anything relevant to your project or idea that you might have. There's a QR code on the bottom right corner of the slide. Feel free to scan it to get the free tickets. I'll just leave 5 seconds on there. All right. Back over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, I see that there's one question that's come in from Rob. Thanks, Rob. So the question here is to Sam or to Ollie. What areas of a property renovation normally require council approvals or permits, etc.?
Yeah,
I can answer a part on that, Ollie.
Go on, Sam.
Yes. So usually when it comes to planning permission, if you would want to get planning permission, that would be related to any changes in the external features of a building. So anything that we're changing on the outside, sizes of windows, extending, converting the loft, anything that changes the external features of a building would need to be sent to the council in terms of a proposal. Now, that type of application could differ based on the requirements, but that is the basis of it. Any changes in external features of a building would require the involvement of the council. And I think Ollie can elaborate here when it comes to specific listed buildings, the process might differ.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Sam said, general rule of thumb, anything that impacts the external areas of the property or how the property looks from the street view, or how it might impact the neighbours externally. So often if it's a big extension or a loft, although you can't see it from street view, that might have light implications to neighbouring properties. And then, but if it's a listed building, then you need permission no matter what to do anything, even if it's just internal renovations. It really depends on what is considered as listed or protected within that particular building. So some listed buildings, it's literally just a listed building just because there's some ceiling coving which is considered heritage and needs to be protected. And so once your appointed architect engages with the local council, you identify that, and then you simply need to plan the project around that one thing. But then sometimes absolutely everything within the property is considered as listed, which of course makes things a little bit more challenging. But having a good experienced architect who has got good relations with the local council, and has experience with listed buildings, and the same goes for just a general extension project. If it's large enough that it's going to require full planning permission, and appointing an architect who has worked with that particular local council before, has contacts within that local council, and just generally knows, yeah, how the local council operates, what's allowed, what's not allowed, etc., etc.
I see Rob's just sort of extended that question, so I'll just go on to that one before I go to Salim's question. But that he said, Robert said not graded, but in a conservation area. Is that the same applies? How does that work?
So that would differ from council to council. So every borough would have local, nuances of local planning policy that could differ from the next borough, for example. But usually when dealing with conservation areas, one of the routes that can be taken is to consult with the council before you lodge an application, so that they are able to guide you through a pre-planning application. They would basically convene with your architect who's drawing up the plans, and they would shed some light on what they consider acceptable and what they don't. And that will allow for the design process to move forward productively and have very specific goals in mind that are coordinated with the council, which would increase the likelihood of getting that permission accepted.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, so for any special requirements, whether it's being in a conservation area, whether it's being a listed building, the key thing is to ensure that the design lead has the right skill set and experience for it. So yeah, really make sure that whoever you appoint as the designer for your project has experience with the particular, whether it's a listed building or a conservation area, and ideally in your local area as well.
Thanks, guys. And then we had another question from Salim. So his question was, what is the typical renovation process?
Yeah, so typically the refresh process, dealing with all types of renovations, is usually spread over 5 different steps. These 5 steps always start with, what could also be considered the most important engagement, which would be the complementary initial consultation. That's where the renovation consultant comes out to meet the prospect at the property, to understand their needs and requirements, understand what the specifics of their, let's start with the existing conditions of the properties are within its context. What is the client sort of looking to achieve, and then helping in advising on what is possible compared to other projects that we have dealt with, and our expertise in that local area. The next step after that would be to go into the first working stage, which would be the scoping and feasibility, and that is to assess the feasibility of what is being proposed, have an understanding of what is required in terms of a plan and concept designs. If it needs planning, then by the end of that stage, you deal with planning, you get the consents before you move into the third stage, which would be the technical stage, in which you would include all the technical elements in terms of design. And then that is where you'd go through a selection exercise with the client to address all material selections, fittings, fixtures, sanitary ware, everything that goes in, ring fence the project in terms of information. That would all be sent out to costing with a QS. Once that returns, you'd have a full comprehensive report that would allow you to understand how that budget is being broken down and where the money is going in terms of labor and material, and everything that is related to building that project. And then from there onwards, it's about moving to the build, having that project manager assigned and taking you through the build, updating you as progress is made, and then handing the project over when it's all done. I hope that answers your question, Salim.
I don't see any more questions in the chat there, so I'm assuming nobody else has any questions. So just to close, I suppose we're just a little bit over that half an hour, so 35 minutes. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to join us. Obviously, thanks to Sam and Ollie for sharing your insights. Very interesting. The key takeaway for me is that you know, you often love your home and where you live. And when you start to expand, maybe your next concern is that you need to actually move. But from what you guys have been sharing tonight, also says that you don't actually need to move. There's some real smart renovation options out there for people so that they can stay in their home and the area that they love. So thank you for that. We will have another webinar next month, the end of September. So, and this is an ongoing series. So we look forward for you guys joining us again. Obviously, if you are ready and you're thinking you would like to speak to one of our renovation consultants and talk through maybe the specifics of your ideas or your projects, then please do make contact with us. We have a website and obviously a phone number, which we're just going to pop up on a slide here. So feel free to contact us either by booking in a free consultation, which you can, or contacting us through the website. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good evening and take care.